On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome everybody inside the Brady Broadcasting Studios at 25 East Glen. This is The Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. And I want to welcome back to the program a guy that I had on the radio on Saturday, a legend in my mind, maybe not in his, but he's a catalyst. Leland Sklar, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
I'm thrilled to be back. I didn't want to leave. I got such a good parking place outside. I didn't want to give it up. So.
Hey, I send out the link just in an email, and I get a response back from the old Kansas Jayhawk, Mike Finnigan.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about Mike? Because Mike told me, he's like, well, I love Lee. We worked a lot together. And I didn't know you got, I mean, of course it makes sense, but you want to talk about working with Mike a little bit?
Mike is one of the greatest gifts in the musical world and also in the human world. He's outspoken and one badass cat. I just love him to death. He's probably one of the greatest B3 players, Hammond B3 players in the world, one of the funkiest soul singers I've ever known. He spent years with Etta James and Bonnie Raitt. I mean, he played with Jimi Hendrix. Guy is just a remarkable musician, and every chance we get to play together, we just leave with big grins on our faces because we do have such a good hang together.
He has been such a soul warrior on my journey. I mean, I've done a couple of interviews with him, but could you talk just from a point of view of like playing with him? If he's playing Hammond organ, then he doesn't have to play the bass. How does it work with the Hammond with you playing bass?
A lot of B3 players I know don't necessarily use pedals. Some are amazing pedal players, but I can't even recall when I worked with Mike whether or not, I don't even think he had the pedals hooked up. I think pretty much he was just playing the top end of the instrument. There's a few guys that are just born to an instrument. I've done a bunch of work with Booker T, and when he plays B3, or I did a lot of work with Billy Preston. And when guys like that sit down at an instrument like that, which is really, to me, kind of pedal steel and Hammond B3 are two of the most insane instruments ever invented. You look at the underpinnings of a pedal steel guitar, and it's kind of mind-boggling, the geometry and the physics of one of those instruments. And when you sit there with a guy who really understands the drawbars and the manuals of an organ, be it a Hammond or a cathedral pipe organ, it's quite astounding. I look at my bass and I go, "Gee, what a pussy!" These guys
it's true.
These guys are traveling in another kind of stratosphere. I'm in the Moranosphere, and they're in the stratosphere. So.
Well, we're all floating in the cosmos. But I mean, the B3 also, it was just so. You came up at a time when the B3 was coming out of the church and into the nightclub. I mean, any nightclub had a B3 in it. I mean, that sound was just all over the place, especially with Wolfgang. You kind of blew my mind a little bit. I really wanted you to talk about your interactions with Bill Graham and how putting Wolfgang, Malo, and Led Zeppelin on a ticket at the Winterland opened people's ears, even whether they were altered or not.
Well, I was when I was in college. I was really close friends. There was a band that emanated out of the area called Pacific Gas and Electric. They became PG&E.
Sure.
And a couple of the guys and I, we were in the art department together. And I remember going up with them to San Francisco when they were playing. I can't remember if they were playing I think it might have been the Fillmore. And I used to go up there and spend a lot of time in the Bay Area. When we were talking last time about the Chitlin stuff, and when I worked with George Harmonica Smith, and we'd go play like the Mandrakes Club in Berkeley, and just different venues in that area. There was a vitality of that whole area, and kind of with my love of that whole scene that was going down in San Francisco. I ended up, when we did Wolfgang, we had a manager named Bruce Gladner, who his company was called Shady Management, and God, if there was ever a prophetic name for a company, that was it. And he had us, and he had Zephyr, which Tommy Bolin was a member of Zephyr.
Oh, I want to tell you, by the way, before you continue, I found... About a year ago, I found that album for $1 in a thrift store. I know Zephyr, a great, and the fact that you were connected with that is unbelievable.
It's, and I actually know Kevin Bacon, so all of this makes total sense.
Yeah, of course it does.
The 6 degrees of separation is actually the funniest thing for me was my favorite pizza joint in New York used to be called Charlie's Corner. It was right on the corner of 58th and Lexington, and Waddy Wachtel turned me on to it. And we used to make a beeline there every time we got to New York. And it's gone. It disappeared a few years back. I think the landlord probably raised the rent up to an intolerable level, and they finally just bailed. And I think they lived in Brooklyn or someplace. I think they went back there and either reopened or just called it. But I was standing there one day eating a slice, and this guy comes running up to me, and he goes, "Oh man, aren't you Lee Sklar?" And I go, "Well, yeah." And the whole time he's like glomming on me. I'm looking at this guy going, I know I've seen this guy. I can't peg it. And it turns out it was Kevin Bacon.
Oh.
But it was when Diner first was released, and and I just recognized this guy's face, and we ended up having a really great hang. But it's really funny throughout the years, and watching, like he's always got his musical journey with his brother going and stuff. But back to the B3 and Bill Graham and all that. So Bruce apparently had an association with Bill Graham, and we were forming the band and decided, since we were becoming associated with Bill Graham and David Rubinson, who was also up in the Bay Area,
of course,
and was a record producer up there, we went in the studio with him and cut about 8 sides, did some demos of the group, which never really, I have them, but they never saw the light of day. And with Bill, his real name was Wolfgang, so we decided to call the band Wolfgang because we didn't think there was any better way to suck up to your manager than to name your band after him. And then about a year later is when James Taylor happened in my life, and we ended up doing a lot of work, like up at the Berkeley Community Theater and the Greek up in Berkeley, and suddenly I was deeply associated with Bill on a really regular basis, and plus we closed out the Fillmore East with James. I think we were the last or the next to last act that played there before they shut that down.
Wow!
And so I used to work with Bill on a really regular basis, and once again it all comes back to, boy, I wish that guy had chosen just to drive in the car on his way home from Concord rather than take the helicopter, which everybody said don't do because the weather was so bad, because he'd probably still be here today if he hadn't made
I'm naive enough. I didn't realize that's how he passed away.
He died in a helicopter crash, and they had been out, I think it was a Huey Lewis gig out at the Concord Pavilion up there, and even the pilot thought that they shouldn't fly, but Bill really wanted to get back. He had something he had to get back to, and it was only like an hour drive. And there was a car, would have taken him right back, but he insisted, and they went down, and the weather was bad. I think they might have hit power lines or something like that, but it was just one of the greatest losses because this guy was
well, he just was so smart. I don't see it happening in today's musical business construct, but it's like for what he did. I mean, there's always that famous thing where the Grateful Dead, and then there was the Preservation Hall jazz band came on, following them, and all the people at the Fillmore West were just having a ball. But it's just like, there was just so much. It was just so much versatility, and there was so much alacrity, and there was so much intermeshing of music at that time. Not just, but he was the catalyst. I mean, he had this. He figured it out as a business model, but he also loved the musicians, and I just, to me, I wanted to ask you, you said last time, there's really nothing better when you look out in the audience and people's heads are swaying back and forth. I jumped the fence at the Berkeley, at the Greek Theater, cut my arm pretty bad about 10 years ago, but there was no concert going on. But that place, can you talk about playing there with James? Was that a place where you would look out at those Greek, concrete, people just dancing and bobbing and weaving? Talk about the playing at the Greek Theater, Berkeley Community Theater. These are relics. They're no longer, they're not the way they were. No,
nothing's the way it was. But the Greek was it was so casual and so free. First off, one of the greatest things there was Bill would always do the most unbelievable backstage scene there. The food, every time it would be like you'd show up and they would go, oh, this time they're having a luau. And he would have this whole thing done up. I mean, he just loved being kind of the master of ceremonies. He loved being in the middle of all this stuff, and he did it so well. But the audience is up there. The only time it was ever really not great was there was really no protection from the sun. So sometimes we'd been up there, and if you started went out for sound check, you could just bake out there because it got really hot.
Interesting. But yeah, once the sun goes down,
it's fabulous. It was fabulous. But there's a few venues like that. I mean, the Berkeley Greek was like that. Red Rocks, for the most part, outside of Denver, is still like that. There's ones that are so kind of defining in your mind.
Did you ever play at the Starlight Theater in Kansas City?
Yeah, that was a great one too.
Is it gone now?
I don't know. I haven't been there in a long time, but I certainly haven't played there in years. If it's still there, I mean, I hope it's still there because it was a beautiful venue.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the art was it just was a beautiful opportunity where the craft, the musician's craft, was taken very seriously. I think that's what Graham also must have known, is that he let the musicians do what they did. He didn't try to tinker with it. He didn't try to micromanage it. And it just must have been a breath of fresh air, especially because you were interacting with you were meeting all these other musicians on top of that.
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing about Bill, though, that even more than how he loved the musicians, he loved the audience. And I remember being at a gig where we just went and hung out there. And I'm not going to say who the artists were at the thing, but they finished their sets, and this was at the Fillmore East. And they went backstage, and they were sitting around kind of hanging out and drinking while the crowd was just going crazy out there wanting an encore. And they weren't responding. They were just sitting back there digging themselves. And I watched Bill finally get to the point where he grabbed them by the scruff of their necks and took them up to the stage and said, "Get out there." And I mean, he more than anything, he wanted the crowd to leave having a fabulous experience, and he would not tolerate any BS from any players that weren't putting on a great show. I mean, he really believed in that relationship of artist and audience, and wouldn't let anything get in the way. I mean, he was a tough cookie. A lot of people, when they talk about him, there's a certain kind of disparaging remarks and stuff, because the guy was a taskmaster. He was a tough guy.
Yeah, no, he was a businessman.
Tough in an incredibly positive way, and everything that he did to make the shows and the scene better. It wasn't like he was pulling an ego trip.
Well, okay, so a little bit of a we know Lee Sklar loves academia, loves learning things. I like learning things too. Tell me the first player to play an electric bass on an album.
Wow, I honestly.
I know the answer, but I want to see. I want to
Great.
know.
Well, I'm dying to find out because I mean, there's all the iconic players, but I'm sure there was somebody that was doing something that didn't quite have the same focus as a Jamerson or somebody like
Right. Well,
that.
like when I talked to David Grisman, like he actually stretched me out. Obviously there were people playing the electric bass before this cat actually put it on an album. But the first album where the electric bass is used is an Art Farmer album with Monk Montgomery.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, so I'm glad I could teach you that. I mean, that to me is so brilliant. Monk, did you ever meet Monk before?
No, I never met him.
Did you see Wes or any of the Montgomery brothers at all ever play?
No, I only just knew him from recordings.
Because
I mean, certainly Wes was like one of the great iconic guitarists of stylistically.
But that to me it was like how progress. I think the album came out in '53.
Well, yeah, because I mean that was when the first electrics were really being kind of prototyped at that point. The very earliest stuff, I would imagine that there would have been, especially somebody coming out of more of a jazz idiom, since that's really pre-rock and roll. That makes sense that they would have done that, because I know there's stuff from Leo Fender that goes back to that period.
Right.
Before it really caught on, because even when you were seeing Bill Haley and all those kind of groups, they were still using upright and early Elvis. That's cool, though.
No, I'm curious because I really want to believe that Leland Sklar was taking an upright bass to the Mandrake Club. Were you playing upright?
I
there?
was playing electric.
You were playing electric at the Mandrake.
Yeah.
Wow. And
yeah, I think I was playing. I think I had an Echo bass, which was like the poor man's Hofner at the time. I started out with a Melody bass and a St. George amp were the first electrics I had. And then when I eventually made enough money, I got myself an Echo bass and a Standell Super Imperial amp. And I think that's what I used up at the Mandrake Club. And when we went up there to play, I drove up in my... I had a 65 Chevy half-ton panel truck, and I had all the gear and stuff and the band, and we were all loaded in my truck and drove up there.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I was doing some. It's just so funny. Before you're gonna love this story. You might love it. Is did you know that band Joy of Cooking?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so right before I talked to you, I had an interview planned with Tony Brown, one of the female singers, and. My engineer calls her up, and I do my intro that exhausted you on Saturday, long intro about Tony Brown. And she said, well, Jake, I really respect you very much, but I'm a different Tony Brown. Another Tony Brown who was the head of Relics magazine for 30 years. But the ironic thing is that I was reading about Joy of Cooking last night, and they would play at the Mandrake Club as well.
Oh, how funny.
It was just, but this woman, I never even knew, and she was completely into... she's from your generation. She saw Pigpen play, fell in love with the Dead, ran Relics magazine for 30 years. I had to recover real quick because I thought we were talking to Tony Brown from Joy of Cooking. It's just, you never know in this life.
Well, when you say Tony Brown, too, Tony Brown was also the keyboard player in Emmy Lou Harris's Hot Band, and he played, I think, a little bit with Elvis, and then he was the head of MCA Records in Nashville for years. So.
Well,
So there's Tony Browns floating all over the place here. We need a libretto to get through them.
I got to look at libretto. You've used that word twice now. I got to look up that word. Here, I want to cut to a piece of music here, and we'll come back and talk about it.
No, but I'm digging it.
Dude, we could do that. We'll just have like 4 different sessions. I'll just keep playing you stuff you haven't heard.
That was one of the reasons I always loved going and working in Japan, because they're the most dedicated fans in the world, and every time we'd arrive there would be a guy standing there with wagons full of albums to sign, and I didn't recognize half the albums. My name's on them, but I just go, really? I don't remember that. Certain things are really stick in your mind, and other stuff just kind of after this many years.
Well, I mean, and you're being honest. I mean, there are some cats that are just incredible. I mean, the Jazzers, I mean, they've been on maybe not 2000, but they've been on a lot of albums, and sometimes they can remember them. But then I remember interviewing Jack DeJohnette, and he couldn't peg the song. And but before we get into that, I'll let the suspense run out. But please talk to younger generations, Lee, about. I'm just learning this now, and it's really hard to do because we are in this, sort of, our attention spans have shrunk. I'm sure yours has shrunk. It's just inevitable because of the digitization. But can you talk about how staying in the moment is just consistent? What does it mean to you? Why is it so important? And how has it affected your quality of life?
That's a pretty deep question.
No, because I'm asking because I love it because you don't remember these tunes because you were working a lot, but it wasn't like you were. A lot of times now, I see my friends that are working on music and they become fixated on it, and they listen to these tracks over and over and over and over again.
Oh, to me, it's a kiss of death.
But I'm saying for you, just staying in the moment and also not obsessing. I think that's part of as it relates to music.
Well, also as a player, for the most part, when people hire me to work on things, they always go, "Well, do you want us to send you like our demos?" And I go, "No, right. I don't want to sit home and listen to something and have any preconceived notions. I really don't want to hear something until I'm sitting in the studio ready to record, because for me, the juices are that moment, that instant response to things. I mean, certainly, if they can show up with a chord sheet or something, some kind of basic structure of the song, but sometimes my very first run through, or by the first or second, is really the performance ones, and I really live in that moment. So to have somebody send me something, or when I've worked with people where they say, "We'd like to get together and rehearse for a few days ahead of time," I go, "Really, don't do that," because what's going to happen in that rehearsal is going to be so magical, and by the time you get it into a studio, you're going to lose it completely. And especially when you rehearse, you sometimes are sitting there in a little circle in a room together, listening to each other, and you walk into the studio, and suddenly you're ISO'd out into different rooms, and that whole magic that happens can dissipate, as the old saying, like a fart in the wind. It's just gone. And you really have to be cognizant of that and live in the moment. But a lot of that is predicated on the players, so that when I get to go in with somebody like a Russ Kunkel or Waddy or any of the great players I've been blessed to play with, most guys respond in the same way, so the collective really can nail it very quickly. And to me, that's really what the moment is really like. I don't dwell on things. A hard thing right now, in terms of like watching what like a lot of the younger artists are having to deal with, is there was really, and I really, kind of one of the things I've really tried to be cognizant about in my career is I really don't want to turn into an old fart who's like talks about, well, in my day, because to me, my day is today and tomorrow. I'm really, like we said last time, I really don't dwell on the past, but there was certain things from my day that I do miss. I miss the idea of conceptual albums where we would spend time crafting. What song's going to follow the next? What are you going to open with? What are you going to close the A side with? And what are you going to open the B side with? And how are you going to end this thing? Where so many projects now, they're not even cutting albums. You're just going in and cutting a tune or two. Then they're going to put it out on iTunes or something like that and see what happens. There isn't this real poignant concept of what this album means, and as much as everybody enjoys listening to their to their iPad or an iPod or whatever they're going to be listening to music on, there still was nothing like the experience of vinyl. The listening to a record became almost like a Japanese tea ceremony where you would clean the record, and
Yes.
you'd set it down. And if you were lucky enough to have a really great turntable, and if not, then through the course of a period of time, you would end up with either a dime on the tone arm, or a penny, or work your way up to a nickel, to the point where you would grind through these things. But there was a whole process to it. You would sit and read the album, the liner notes, and look at the artwork, and that part of it I really miss. Because they were full projects all the time, you really were in a different headspace when you were recording, because you really had this big picture. It wasn't like a one-hit wonder kind of moment where you're going to cut one or two tracks.
Well, and then, like I said, cutting through Hurricane Arthur, listening to In the Pocket, it's like you look at that picture. I'm like, oh, I interviewed Bohannon. I got to get to Sklar. I'm going to get to Bobby Hall, and
that's the greatest picture on the back in that album.
My mom had a CD of it and it's great because my wife and you put on. I put on Forward Motion, like that bolero tune, and she wants that off immediately, even though I could listen to that all day. But then you put on like JT with Sklar, and we can just cut through that. But you're like, look at this smorgasbord. I mean, the budgets were there. You knew there was consistency. And I think when you talk about these cats that are younger cats cutting a song or two, putting it on iTunes, the travesty is that, okay, there's a reason why you have arrangers or stringer like Clarence McDonald or
the Gene Pages.
Exactly, because how can you possibly be arrogant or egotistical enough to believe that you as a musician are equally accomplished as an engineer or a producer? I think to me it is fundamentally, people can say, oh, well, you can make your own album now, put it up. No, that's great, but it's going to sound, if you're a great artist, then just do what you do good,
Exactly. You also have to be trusting.
Trust.
A lot of people don't want to give up the control. Everybody's just You're absolutely right, though. I mean, there are on those albums you would bring in arrangers and engineers and second engineers, and you would have an art department that had concepts, and there were so many people involved in making these. It's like anybody can go out and buy a pretty damn good Canon camera right now. A lot of interviews I do, they just come, and they don't come with film equipment. They come with just a handheld SLR, and the stuff looks great. It's digital and all that, but as compared to sitting there with a camera crew that really films, it's people have talked about like instruments and go, how hard is that one to play? And I go, they're all easy to play unless you want to be great. Then they're all hard.
No, I mean, yeah, you're and it's like, if you're going to put that much effort and time into this stuff, then you're going to want to make sure the art is pretty damn good too. You're going to want to make sure it's a good concept album. I think the whole thing is, it's just so great to talk to you because you lived through that bastion, and it makes it so much more. But I mean, just my generation in general, was there ever I've talked to cats who, did especially live. Did you ever have one of those experiences where someone tried to intimidate you by saying, you can't play shit, man? You get off the stage and maybe, but it kind of toughened you up a little bit mentally. I mean, was there sort of one of those challenges early on live where someone went after you and you just realized that you were competent enough to keep moving forward?
I'm sure there were moments like that. But nothing is coming to mind. I know certainly if somebody had confronted me like that, I'd probably just take the bass off and hit him with it. I'm not going to prove anything with chops, but boy, this could really hurt your head if you're not paying attention.
By the way, we just listened to my needle on my record player is literally almost ground down. That session that was Whiskey by Rita Coolidge, 1973, Leland Sklar on bass. That was that track.
I love working with Rita. We did David Anderle produced all those records with Rita, and we did all of the Rita and Christofferson when they were a couple records too. And we did most of that at Sunset Sound, and it was always a treat to work with her. We did Higher and Higher was one of her big things, and that was the first time I ever worked with Booker T. and Cropper was on that track, on that album. And Mike Utley usually played keyboards on that stuff, and he's been like the main keyboard player with Jimmy Buffett for forever.
Utley was another cat that played the B3 like Finnigan, I think. He played a lot of organ too.
Yeah.
The a guy that stood out to me, I wanted you to, maybe was a mentor to you, I'm not sure, but I know his son, or sort of do, but Abe Laboriel Sr., you knew him?
Oh, God, Abe is one of the greatest. I love
Can you
Abe.
talk about, he's the father of Abe Laboriel. I mean, the Abe Laboriel that I'm thinking of is more, a little bit younger than you, I think.
Oh, yeah, much younger.
Much younger,
I'm much closer to Abe Sr.
Tell me about Abe Sr. I couldn't believe when I saw that name jump out. I said, because I saw Abe Laboriel playing electric bass on this like 81 video of Freddie Hubbard tuned up. I mean, with and so tell me about his father.
Yeah, well, Abe's one of the first call bass players in Los Angeles. He did a lot of work with Lee Ritenour and Larry Carlton. He's to me, the thing I love about Abe more than anything is his joy and passion when he plays is one of the most infectious things there is. I remember on the Tonight Show many years ago, Lee Ritenour, it was one of his first appearances on the show, and Abe was playing, and I thought if I was in the audience and they said, and tonight we have Lee Ritenour, if I was watching, unknowing what was going on, I would have thought Abe was Lee,
right.
Because Lee was just standing there playing, his jazz guitar, and Abe is like a Mexican jumping bean, just bouncing off the walls when he plays. And I thought, this guy, no matter what's going on, he's the guy that always commands attention. His spirit is just deep and beautiful, and he's
I just want to be clear for myself, though.
He's a unique player, and his sons are great. I mean, Abe Jr. I've known since he was a teenager, and all the work he's been doing with McCartney during this whole period and stuff is just astounding. I mean, to have watched his career evolve the way it has, it's really amazing.
Well,
they're a great family. Just
I don't know. I'm confused. Abe Laboriel, you knew his. I'm trying to figure out if that's the guy you knew, or whether you were close with his father.
I'm closer to. Well, I've known Abe Sr. For years, but both being bass players. Needless to say, we don't work together. We only know each other. But I've done a lot of sessions with Abe Jr. on drums, when we did not the most recent one, but the previous. Steve Lukather's solo album. It was Abe and I on that, but we've done like a lot of albums together. He's a terrific drummer. He's also a really good singer.
Well, we're gonna fork it over with another tune. It just blew my mind. Listen to it. This has been on the turntable the last couple of days since we did our first interview. We'll come back and talk about it.
Cool.
know. I love your ability with Kunkel to get on a glide pattern and just float away, man. It's this, you feel like you're floating in some sort of amniotic sac.
No, I think that was Jim Horn playing flute.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Joe
Lala.
Joe Lala, that tune was called Rainbows.
Yeah, Joe just passed away recently.
Did he really?
Yeah, really sad.
Because he's playing all that cool percussion. Dirgy was writing out of his mind on this. I just found this Fork It Over album from 77. And so much of this stuff, it just goes and just flows, man. I think it's really, were you aware of is there any other rhythm section that had an opportunity to cut as many albums as you guys did?
I really don't know. I'm not sure, like when you look at the Muscle Shoals guys and, when you think about, Booker and those guys down there, or some of, the sections out of Memphis and all those, how many albums they did. I know we were working our butts off. There was a lot of work back at that period, and we spent a lot of time in the studio. So we were lucky, though, that we got to also be on the road so much together.
The other thing you brought up the Swampers, David Hood. I had a chance to interview him, and he said one of the things that was really important, just being autodidactic. I mean, you didn't have the ability to rewind tapes. You had to hear stuff on the radio and kind of pick it up. I mean,
yeah.
In some ways, your ears were not locked, and I think that is. Do you think that had an effect on your growth?
Oh, certainly, yeah. It was just a different world. Just the way we approached music, the way we thought about it, the way the business ran, because it wasn't this industry that it became. And there was a lot of different people working. There was a lot of artists. It wasn't like there's a couple of artists, like your Beyonce and Jay-Z supporting, their whole side of the business, and there's like a few artists out there that are, generating the bulk of the income. Well, I mean, in those days, man, there was such a beautiful family of artists where everybody was keeping everything afloat because everybody was doing fairly well. It's just different world, It'll never be back to that, and I'm glad I was there for it, and I miss great aspects of it, but it's, you want to try to be relevant. So you move on.
You do. And actually, I read somewhere you talked about having a very, your outlook on the future of music is very positive.
Music is great. I mean, people go, oh, man, there isn't any good music out there. I go, well, you're not looking. Because,
right.
Man, I hear stuff, not on a not as much as I used to, but, boy, stuff pops out at me, and I just go, oh, man, what a beautiful voice, or what a great song, or this and that. I think that's not the issue. I think the issue in this day and age is it's easy to make music. Now, what do you do with it after you've made it? And I've worked on a lot of projects over the past couple of years where they've been amazing, and then I start getting calls from the artists and stuff going, man, do you have any ideas what we can do with this, or anybody I can talk to? There isn't that. As much as everybody kind of disliked the labels and would complain about them, there was a certain machine in order that could help move product, get airplay and all that, where everybody's now sits around going, man, I hope I can get this into a movie or a TV show or, a commercial or something. And it's really kind of, when guys would come to me on, they'd say like our site, man, we got 180,000 hits on our song. And I'd go, well, if that was a buck a hit, you'd be rocking. But what does that ultimately mean?
Right.
So the difficult thing now is not making the music, because there's a lot of really gifted people out there. It's what do you do with it after you've made it, and how do you amortize that into something where you can afford to make music as your primary living? And that's the hard part, and that's the area I really don't know. I mean, I'm not tech ignorant, but I'm not tech super savvy, so I'm not really sure how you go in and work all this stuff to make it actually happen for you.
Well, I think it would be great to have video of younger cats doing their music while you're filling out Medicaid Part D and then playing. I mean, I think just to me the transition is pivotal. I mean, from the Chitlin Circuit that you had, those cats don't exist anymore. We do live in a different time now, and like you said, that there were cats that were able to facilitate the music, and my engineer was a DJ during the height of freeform radio, where you could hear, I mean, you could hear Rita Coolidge into Cannonball Adderley into Peter, Paul, and Mary, or and that was just a tonic that and it opened people's ears. I have a question. I know you talked about this, but my engineer wanted to know your go-to bass for studio work.
I have a few basses depending on the song. It really comes down to the song. But my main bass that I've had since we built it around 73, I think, or maybe 74. A little background on this. It was, there used to be a place called Westwood Music in Los Angeles that was like the watering hole for all the music people. You'd go in there on any given day and you'd see like Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther sitting around jamming in there, and Lindsey Buckingham would be there. It was just one of these really great places. Fred Wallachy, who's still around and still doing stuff with music, it was his family's business, and it was in West L.A. on Westwood Boulevard. Well, he had a guy named John Carruthers who ran his repair department. And John did a lot of work for me on stuff that I had. Well, we decided, I found a 62 Precision, Fender Precision neck, and no bass, just a neck. And I'm not a fan at all of Precisions. I like the jazz bass necks myself. So I ended up going out to Charvel, which was out actually near where I live now, who were building replacement parts, and they had all these alder bodies there. So I went through and hung about a dozen of them from pieces of wire and just tapped on them until one of them just resonated. And I bought it, took it back to John. He took a template off of my old 62 jazz bass neck, and we reshaped the Precision neck into a jazz neck. But in doing so, also had to strip the frets off of it. And while he was doing that, I walked around his shop and I saw a bunch of different fret wire hanging on the wall. And I asked him what this one was, and he said that's mandolin wire, which is the thinnest fret wire you can get. I said, let's do it with that. He said, I don't think that'll work. I said, well, let's try it. I'll pay you for a refret if it doesn't work.
Right.
So we ended up with this Charvel body, which was actually a Precision body, but what I decided to do was when they started EMG, I got some of the very first EMG pickups, and I ended up with two sets of Precision pickups. We ended up putting those where jazz bass pickups would have gone on a jazz body, but we reversed their position from the standpoint, it's hard to describe verbally. It's easier when you see it. But on a Precision, normal Precision bass, there's two little pickups that sit in juxtaposition. The one that's closest to the bridge is for the G and the D string, and then the closest to the neck is the A and the E string. Well, I thought, just by the nature of the high strings, why would you put the pickup closer to there? So we flipped their position so that the E and the A half of it was closer to the bridge, and we ended up with two sets of those, and it made for the most even sounding bass because the clarity was straight across, and those pickups are great. And I have like one of the very first Hipshot detuners on it that was a prototype that Dave, when they were designing those, came up with, and a badass bridge. So when I do interviews, I normally refer to this bass as Frankenstein because it's just like body parts that were assembled into a being. And the first time we plugged it in, we just kind of went, oh man, check this thing out. And it's what I've used on probably 85 or 90% of everything I've recorded since the mid 70s.
I got another response from John Densmore when I interviewed you, and I was wondering about your experience playing with those cats, especially John as a drummer. You were on on Full Circle at least, which is just the tracks you're on are awesome. And I just was wondering what your experience was like playing with John.
Well, it was great. I mean, it was it was one of the first albums that they did after Morrison passed.
Right.
And it was kind of, I mean, I was so aware of those guys because, I mean, I was always down on the Sunset Strip, and we would see everybody playing down there all the time. And so I was certainly aware of those guys, but it was always kind of funny when you find yourself in the studio with them. And there's a certain, when you're talking about the Doors, and you're suddenly looking around the room, and there's Robbie and Ray and John. You're going, wow, this is a trip. It's really amazing. It was great. We had a ball doing that. I loved playing with those guys. It was, I would always sit there and watch Ray. He was such a great. He had that little great bass unit that he would use. I think it was a little Fender, like a one octave thing that he did a lot of the bass parts with his left hand, and. But it was a kick to be in the studio with those guys because it certainly is an iconic group, and all those names conjure up a special time in history. So, I'm sure we had a ball playing, but more than anything, I just kind of remember the fact that I was in there with these guys who I was so aware of. And I've been through that a lot of times where I walk in the studio and I find myself sort of pinching myself because I'm still a consummate fan. And I enjoy any chance I get to play with guys who I've had, I'm aware of, and I've had respect for, and suddenly to find myself sitting in there with them it's always a real kick. But they were really nice guys.
Did you? The other thing I couldn't believe. How did you get to know the Cady brothers?
I'm losing the connection here a little bit.
How did you get to know? How did you get to know the Cady brothers?
That was through David Foster. When they were really young kids, I think their father hired Foster to do to do an album with them, and I think they must have been like 12 or 14 when we did that album. And then I've worked with them over the years. I worked with John a number of times as a drummer, and but that was through Foster, and I had met Foster when he first moved to Los Angeles from Canada, and ended up hustling a ton of work for the guy when he got here because I thought he was one of the best keyboard players I had ever worked with, and we did a lot of work together back in the early days when he first hit the scene.
The last thing I want to tell you is that my cousin, I'm not sure if this name's going to ring a bell for you, Cindy Yorks, was very good friends with someone named Heidi. That was not anymore, but when I put up the picture of you, she goes, Jake, do you know I know Lee Sklar? Cindy Yorks.
That name's ringing a bell. I'd have to.
I'll get more information, but
yeah,
it was just the fact that my family, it was all the 6 degrees of separation. So it was just classic. And it's going to put a wrap on part 2, my man. And we'll be in touch. I just, you're a consummate fan. You're also, you're part of the brotherhood that, like you said, everybody was doing pretty well, and pretty well meant, well, let's share the wealth so that everybody can feel that love. And the only way to be able to demonstrate that now is through prose, and then listening to how good the music was and still is. So thank you, my man. It's great to do these sessions with these sections with you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'll wait till I hear from you for round 3.
Round 3, baby. You have a great day, Lee.
Okay, Jake, man. It's a pleasure.
Take care, brother.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.